One of the results of the revolution was the land reform. The land reform was introduced by Pyotr Stolypin. And look at this picture of Stolypin. Stolypin was the prime minister of the Russian Empire right after the revolution from 1906. Repin was a really great artist. Look at this picture. You can see a person who is clever. You can see that he is a decisive person, a very strong face. You can see that he is capable of action. But look at the wall and look at his hand. There is something strange there. Both are red. Please remember that, because we shall see why it was red. The land reform was really needed. Peasants were still not having their land in their property, and this is exactly what Stolypin has introduced. His idea of the land reform was to concentrate the land in the property of a particular family, a particular person, not to be divided and subdivided again by the village communes. The reform undermined village communes and introduced private property in the villages for the first time. Of course, it simultaneously introduced poor and rich peasants in the village, because some lost their land and some got their land. And here you can see the picture of a rich peasant and a poor peasant. You can see how the rich peasant is dressed and how the poor peasant is dressed. The poor peasant wears bast shoes. He obviously asks the rich peasant to give him some grain, or maybe he has brought his debt to the rich peasant. And the rich peasant says, well, no, not really. What was the result of the reform? Historians disagree about it. Some think that the reform was a complete failure. Some think that no, it wasn't a failure. You can judge for yourself. 6 million peasant households, out of 13.5 million, applied to register their land as their private property. Before the 1917 revolution, only 1.5 million had time to be registered, which is 10%. But some more registered their land as cooperatives. All in all, 31% of land was registered as private property. So yes and no, the reform was not finished, and private property as a notion in the Russian village did not really take root. But some of the results were definitely visible. And first of all, the harvests became much better and the food production increased. But this is not the reason for Stolypin's red hands. Stolypin introduced courts-martial for the first time in Russian history. Why did he need to do that? It is because in the previous decade, from the late 19th century until 1906, tens of thousands terrorist acts happened. Some were foiled, some were not. 9,000 people were killed in these terrorist acts. Stolypin's courts-martial sentenced 5,735 people to death. Only 3,741 were executed, actually. This seems, well, not very much, but in the previous decades, almost the whole 19th century, from 1825 until 1905, the number of people executed was only 191. Well, Stolypin sent 66,000 people to forced labor and arrested 200,000. That is why his hands were red, and that is why he was deeply disliked by the revolutionaries. He himself died of a terrorist act in 1911. Stolypin's role in Russian history is discussed by historians until today. Whether he was a great statesman or he was the person who stifled the revolution, well, it is for different people to judge differently. But we must remember what Stolypin said in 1907. He addressed the Duma and he said, "You need great upheavals. We need great Russia."